Alright, so we're going to look really quickly on how to solve patterns. So patterns are great ways to visually see algebra. And so for this pattern, we're going to determine how we think the pattern will look like in the next figure and determine how many would be in the 21st figure of this pattern. And we want to talk about how we described our method of counting. So we're talking about stars in this pattern. And so first thing is each thing in a pattern is called a figure, okay? And we always take the beginning figure and we go and label that figure 1, figure 2, and figure 3. And so we like to use the letter N to denote figure numbers. Okay, so that's one thing we want to get out of the way. The second thing is you want to talk about is determine how many things are in each figure. So we're talking about stars here. So in this case I have 1, 2, 3 stars in figure 1. 3 plus 2 is 5. And then 4 plus 3 is 7. And so what I noticed right away is that as I went from figure 1 to figure 2, I added 2 stars to go from one to the next. And then when I went from figure 2 to figure 3, I added 2 stars. In fact, just to visualize this in yellow, here's figure 1, sorry. So if I highlight, these stars, that's figure 1. So it looks like I took the first figure and just added 2 stars to the end. Now if I take this next color, I highlight in figure 3 the figure 2, so that'd be these stars here, right? Again, it looks like I took what figure 2 was and just added 2 stars to the end. So to answer my first question, what would the next figure look like? Well, it would look like figure 7, but it would have 2 stars at the end. So I'm going to show that over here. So I'm going to draw figure 7. And then I'm going to add 2 stars to the end. So that's going to be in purple here. So I would add here. I would add here. And I should get 7 plus 2. I should get 9. So let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I get 9 stars. So I would keep doing that infinitely until I got to how far I want. But you can see how drawing pattern figure after figure in a pattern can be daunting, and it could take a lot of time. So we want to come up with a more efficient way of finding out, hey, how many stars would be in such and such pattern number. So in this problem, we want to look at the 21st figure. So this is figure 4. So if I drew 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 21, how many stars would be in my figure? And so one thing we want to talk about is this growth, right? So we can see that as we go from figure to figure, right, the growth of each figure is constant. So when I have a constant growth, write that up here, I have a constant growth, that is represented by some sort of linear expression. And so in Algebra 1, an expression we used a lot to show linear growth was m times x plus b. That's in algebra, but we're talking about patterns. So when I'm talking about patterns, I substitute m for n, because the thing in my pattern is the figure number. That's the input. So the figure number determines what I get as terms of how many stars. And so let's talk about it. So the m value of m represents the growth. Okay, how is the pattern growing? And b is, and this is going to be a term idea I got to come to, is the amount of things in the 0th term. So what the 0th term is if I were to go backwards, or if I were to draw the figure that would come before my first figure, how many things would be in that figure? So let's write an expression for this pattern. So the growth of this pattern is 2. So n would be 2. So I would take 2 times n. N is the figure number in the pattern. I would add to it the amount of stars that would be shown in the figure that came before 1. So if I'm going up by figure number and I add 2, to go backwards I subtract 2. So if I were to go backwards from 0 to 1, I would have to subtract 2 stars. So that would leave me 3 minus 2 is 1. So there would be 1 star. So over here, the 0th term, I'll squeeze it in, would have 1 star to keep that pattern going, right? So let's check to make sure it works. So if I plug in 1, if I plug in the figure number, it should spit out how many stars are in figure number. So figure 1 has 3. So 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. Let's check it out for 2. I plug a 2 and I should get 5. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. Then 7 and 3. So when I plug 3, I get 7. It checks out. So how about for the 21st figure? So for the 21st figure, right, n is going to equal 21. Big surprise. So I get 2 times 21 plus 1, and that's going to equal 2 times 21 is 42 plus 1 is 43. And so if I were to draw out this pattern all the way out to 21 figures, I'd expect the 21st figure in that pattern to have 43 stars.